I'm starting recording now. And at the beginning, I would like to remind ourselves to follow the code of conduct, which we can summarize to the sentence, be nice to each other. And if there is some topic you want to discuss at today's meeting, please feel free to add it to our document. And let me actually open it. I need one volunteer who will be doing notes for today, please. Is there someone?
I can take notes.
Yeah.
This is Justin. I'll take notes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so is there someone new on our chat today? If there is so, please, maybe someone want to share something about him or herself. You are welcome being here on our meeting. And let's start maybe on some recurring topics. I think that the last time we did billing review, am I right? Or we want to do it again today?
I think we should skip today.
Okay, perfect. And are there any action items from the last time? There is one thing, unfortunately, I was traveling a lot, so I couldn't connect with Tim Hawking to help him. And if there is there something which I can help you again this week, Tim?
Yeah, so let me give a quick update. I have the AAA cluster up, and I brought up, because I didn't understand what was going on with the publisher bot stuff, I took one that I did understand, which was GCS Web, and I brought it up. I thought it would be a fun time to try using the managed certificates feature from GKE. It works, but after discussion on the mailing list, I agree that we should switch back to Cert Manager. So that's my action item, is to basically just reinstall Cert Manager on that cluster and flip GCS Web. If you want to help, you could help by understanding the publisher bot config and what we need to put.
I think that we lost. Yeah, no. Okay. So to summarize, to understand the publisher bot, and could you say again the last part?
Sorry, the publisher bot configuration. I think Nikita shared it on the mailing list. And I took a look at it. It wasn't exactly obvious to me which parts are YAML that I'm supposed to kubectl apply and which parts were examples. And so if you want to take a look at that and start to comprehend that,
definitely, yeah.
Then we could get it turned up in the new cluster.
Okay, perfect. I will do that.
Yeah, so Nikita and I can help with that as well. Yeah.
I'm also here, so I can definitely help with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Right. I think what we should do is like try to document it. So the only caveat here is the key. We need to add your GPG key to the repository, so you would be able to unlock basically the key.
Yeah, I mean, I also talked to Stefan about it. We don't really have any concerns about moving it to the K8s.io repo, but the only qualm I have is, so it has the GitHub token for the K8s publishing bot account, which has admin access to all our staging repos. At the current state of things, I think it's just like a bunch of people, Christoph, Tim, you. So that's okay, but if we decide to scale the number of people, I mean, we just want to restrict access to that account. So I'm pretty sure it's okay for now, but I'm not sure how we'd like to handle it if we decide to scale.
Yeah, so I think this is a great example of a place where we need to be cautious as we move forward. I really want to take a hard look at the RBAC around this and see if we can set up the Google Groups as RBAC, so that we can create a Google group for people who are able to see the in-cluster secret, and not everybody who has access to these clusters.
Right. So one thing here, Nikita, is like Tim said, we should be like one of us should be able to upload the secret, right? And then other people can use it, something like that, right?
Yeah.
If we can divide up the steps, so people who have cluster admin can update the cluster whenever needed. But then, if it's just messing with the secrets, then the three of us should be able to take care of that part.
Yeah. So like the question I had was, if we add more people to Git as like Git crypt collaborators, they will have access to the token though, right? So even if they like don't update it for the publishing bot.
Right. So we can divide up that workflow, right? So one of the three of us who currently have Git crypt access will upload the secret, right? And then Bart can then go start the bot.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah.
But when we do that, I'd like to make sure that, like as a test, no offense, Bart, I'm using you as an example, that you can't read the secret, but you can run the rest of the app.
Yeah, that looks like an awesome separation that we'll need to start enforcing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I'm traveling the rest of this week, and I'm out on Monday. But after that, I would love to get this wrapped up, Bart. So maybe we can sync up next week.
Yeah, okay, perfect. For me, it sounds great because I also traveling this last of the week. And so let's say that from next Tuesday, I will try to contact with you and
great.
We'll figure it out.
We'll plan something then. Thanks.
So for now, can me or Nikita tag team to just publish the secret?
Sure. I mean, you have org admin access now, so you should be able to access the cluster. You can create the namespace in the cluster, and if you feel so inclined, you can start playing with the RBAC and the Google groups to put that into play. I haven't actually used that feature myself yet, but the cluster should be enabled for that.
Interesting. Okay, so I don't know enough about that to mess with it.
Just Google it.
That's what I do.
All I'm gonna do. That's all I'm gonna do. Documentation's not so bad.
I spent one solid week getting a CI up and running, so I'm kind of Googled out right now.
I might be missing a bit of context, but just with the actual restriction of who can do what like which bit what are we trying to actually defend against there? I'm just thinking, like, if someone's got admin access to a cluster that contains the secrets and they can deploy new code into that cluster, then it's not really a hard security boundary. And I think we probably agree, well, I don't know, do we all agree that we don't need that hard security boundary? Because I think we should probably note it as such if that is the case and it is possible to get them out there, because otherwise we might be freer adding people to those groups without really recognizing in future the actual implications of adding people to those groups. Might be
I think that's a great point. What I want to do is verticalize access so that namespace by namespace, we have a group of people who have effectively full admin access to that namespace. And there'll be a small set like DIMs who have access to everything. But for most people, let's say we pull together 3 volunteers who are going to run PublisherBot and take alerts for it, then those 3 people can probably access the secret and everything else, but the people who run GCS Web cannot, right? And I'm just using Bart as an example here because he would probably actually be in the group, but I want to make sure that somebody who's out of the group can't access it.
Cool. No, that makes sense. So it's kind of a namespace by namespace thing as opposed to people working on the same one. Yeah, cool. Nice.
Okay, is there something else we want to discuss with this topic now?
I think GCS Web and PublisherBot were the only things that were even in the old Dev2 cluster. So once we get those things flipped over, then we can actually turn off the Dev2 cluster. So just as an exciting step towards having only a productionable cluster.
Okay. So let's maybe move to another topic. I'm looking at the things from the last week, and there is like a mention that Catherine will be exploring GCB app for GitHub. Is there anybody who can tell something about this or move things forward?
I don't see Catherine on the list today, and I forgot to follow up with her before this, so I apologize. I will follow up with her on that, but maybe we can use that as a segue for Linus to give us an update. Linus, do you want to talk about the stuff we've been talking about most recently?
Yeah, sure. We have been going through a security review at Google for the promoter project, and they have made some recommendations. It is ongoing, but basically there have been some points raised already about how we can make the promoter more robust. So one of the examples, probably the biggest one that has come up so far is, you know how we have in the promoter manifest the registry destinations, service account key information, not the credentials themselves, but like the name of the service account. That and the images that we want to promote in one single file. They made a suggestion of separating those two parts out. So basically the registries field would be separated out from the images, so that, for example, somebody cannot make a PR, silently, secretly make a PR that changes, a little thing in the service account information along with the images that they want to promote. So, and of course, you would lock the registry's field info, the metadata info down in a different folder, probably with, more restrictive permissions, and less people can approve. Probably it would be maybe one or two people who can approve. That's my guess, because that would probably never ever change. So I made an issue tracker for that, but that is the update.
I'd also like to, can I extend on that? I'd welcome anybody who feels like they're concerned about security should probably be paying attention to this, because we're going to, realistically, we're opening the door a lot wider to a lot more people to have access to our software supply chain. And I would encourage every organization who cares about Kubernetes security. In fact, we should probably reach out to the ProdSec team and just say, hey, everybody do your own audits, because now's the time to do it before we go live with it. This is a place where the more input, the better.
Yeah, so before we do the migration and, turn this thing on for everybody, it would be a good time to try to poke holes in this thing, as Tim put it at one point. So yeah, it would be great if people can try to, I don't know, audit or something. Yeah.
What we can do to inform the people, what do you think, who should we be informed about that? And should we create an action item from that?
Linus, I'm at the airport, so I'm going to tag you. Can you send a separate note to Tim Allclair and ask him to get the ProdSec group, the Kubernetes ProdSec group, involved? I don't know exactly what their email is, and I think their list is closed, but Tim's on it, so he can loop them in and basically say, we want to go live with this. We'd love to do a presentation for the ProdSec people across different companies, and we'd love them to do an audit before we do that. We want everybody to be confident in this.
Okay.
So we'll get Tim Allclair to help open the door to that. That's a great point.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. That sounds great. Is there anything related to that topic which we want to discuss more?
Can I throw one more point out? I had suggested at some point, maybe a few weeks ago, that we should use only GCB and no human push access to the staging repos. Our internal security audit strongly endorsed that idea, but I pushed back with the idea that this is a large community with a large diversity of people. I would like to set a goal of 6 to 12 months that we push from strongly recommending people to use GCB to requiring people to use GCB. And I see Jason is here, so as the trailblazer on that, do you think that would be appropriate, Jason?
So the challenge that we have today is that we don't have the automation as far as the actual release process in place using GCB yet. So we would still need to actually build that out before we could actually, go to only using GCB for the staging builds today.
And that's why we're giving you a year.
Yeah, I think a year seems reasonable. I do potentially have concerns about how difficult the process might be for on-ramping folks, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the process, as we've kind of discovered. But assuming that there are other folks other than yourself, Tim, that can help with troubleshooting those types of issues, and we have decent documentation for on-ramping, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Just
What about if we should also put an emphasis on making the builds reproducible? I have a concern, in my opinion, I have a concern over how we're going to approve PRs, and like whether or not they build with GCB, in my mind, is less important to the idea that if we built it with GCB, we would get the same result, right? I feel like that to me is, and I'd love to see like some approval flow that was like built with a different thing, like built locally and come up with the same SHA, for example.
That's a great idea, but I just have a feeling that that's far from like
it's a 2-year window.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, great idea though.
I would feel really good if I just knew that no humans were allowed to push to staging, and that anything that was in staging got there through GCB, and everything that was run through GCP was triggered through a GitHub pull request that had been merged, so that we have a nice history of that stuff. I think we can do better even than that, but I'd be really happy if we could get that far this year.
So what should be the action item for that? Is there any document or any information about this 12 months period we want to achieve, or suggestion?
No, not yet. As a result of the security audits, sorry, somebody needs to board their plane. As a result of these security audits, we'll write up some notes and encourage that be a directional guidance, but not a required at the moment. And that's part of why, Catherine, looking into the GCB GitHub app would streamline this. We want to make the onboarding of this as easy as possible so that people don't push back when they don't have to.
Okay,
so it's more or less my action.
Okay, so maybe let's remember the next time to check if Catherine did the research and if something changed. Okay. Is there anything more about this topic? Okay, I can't hear anything. So there is the last action item I can see from the last meeting about Terraform. Are there any updates in this area?
I think all the Terraform stuff is merged and it works great. We should close those issues. The production cluster is live. It's just not serving anything yet.
Right. Okay. One question I wanted to ask here, Tim, is we have a lot of projects in Boscos that we currently use, for testing, right? So will what we have in Terraform help us mint projects that we can give to Boscos?
I don't know what Boscos is.
Okay, Boscos is the one that we use in SIG testing so whenever a CI job needs to run clusters in GCP, right? Then we ask for a name of a project. So we do a HTTP post and we get back the name of a GCP project to use. And then we do heartbeats to tell Boscos that, okay, we are using this project for X amount of time. And then when the time expires, we stop the heartbeat and then we release the project back to Boscos. So it's like a reservation system. I believe the same thing is being used for AWS also to get a list of credentials that can be used to log into AWS to run something. And then it's also attached to the janitor. The janitor takes care of cleaning up things when the heartbeats go bad or the jobs die.
That sounds amazing. I had no idea. What happens when you're not paying attention? That's great. I have no context on how to use that or whether we want Terraform or something more programmatic. As soon as we get the production cluster up and let's set a benchmark for ourselves. I'd like to move all of the things that are in what we call the utility cluster today, which is really about 5 things. It's like the K8s redirector and those things. Once we get those moved over to AAA, then I would love to tackle the CI and PROW and other problems. And we'll figure out then if what we have is appropriate or whether we have to adapt.
Sounds good.
Sorry. As I understand it, Boscos leases basically empty GCP projects or empty AWS whatevers. And so it sounds like what you were more suggesting, Dims, was not like using Terraform to create a cluster, but more just to create empty projects. And then I think what you're pointing out is if we were to do that, we would move the billing of some of that into the CNCF billing.
Correct.
So clearly,
yes.
we need to own the billing part of it. Like all of this has to move under the CNCF umbrella. The question is whether that's programmatic or Terraform or a pre-warmed pool of clusters. I don't know or have an opinion.
It's basically just a bunch of projects. It would be good to start having those projects be under the CNCF before we try to move PROW. Otherwise, we'll have like the CNCF thing controlling a bunch of Google projects. That's weird.
Yeah, that would be weird. I don't feel quite ready personally to start the process of comprehending all of that. But if Ben or you or somebody wants to start or has good documentation on how we might want to move this all over, like sequencing wise, that would be a good time to get started on it.
Yeah, the only twist here was, the service account that we currently feed into the CI, is obviously specific to the, the project and the cluster. So we would end up, trying to figure out how to make that work. But, let's not worry about that here.
I'm sorry, I need to drop off. I need to get on a plane in a couple minutes.
Okay, bye, Tim.
I've got a couple of action items, and I'll talk to Bart next week, and hopefully we'll get AAA rolling.
Yep. Bye-bye, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Travel safely. Safe travels.
So can we add any action item for that? What do we need?
I will track it. I will add an issue.
Okay.
Just assign a action item to me, Bart.
Okay, perfect. So these are the last action items. Is there anything which we didn't mention yet and we should mention on this call, or we can just start like an open discussion? Okay, I can't hear any suggestions, so we are switching to open discussions. There is no topic inside. If there is something you want to discuss, just feel free to do so now, or if not, then I think that we will have like a 30 minutes back.
Since a few of us are here who are associated with SIG testing and just testing in general, I would like to talk a little bit about that. Justin, Jason.
Sounds great.
So the last week, I spent time standing up end-to-end test from Kind. So Kind starts CapG, and then CapG starts a cluster, and then we run the conformance test. So we got that up and running. So that seems to be kind of stable right now. But then the questions I had around was, how do we get all that infrastructure? What are the things that I don't know? I ran some make commands, I ran some stuff, but I don't know what they do. What is the infrastructure behind that we need to move to CNCF infrastructure? That was basically the question.
I mean, what infrastructure did it use to run CapG? Like, does it need to push images or?
Jason, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So I think it really depends. At a bare minimum, we would need some type of a base image that we could use, but I think we could leverage some of the features that we have in the KubeADM bootstrapper that we use. to basically override the binaries that we deploy on disk. So I don't think we'd actually need images for, you know, the versions of Kubernetes that we want to test. But ideally, the way that we're running things today is we're basically bootstrapping Cluster API just to be able to run the conformance tests against a given version of Kubernetes. And I don't think that's really the ideal situation long term. So I think potentially having essentially a longer lived Cluster API management server that could then be used to spin up clusters of a given Kubernetes version to run conformance against would be a much more scalable and less error-prone way to kind of accomplish automated testing through Cluster API rather than, you know, basically having to do a bootstrap Cluster API just to be able to spin up the cluster, just to be able to test.
Right. So there are two things here I want to highlight from what Jason said. One is the image that we mint So right now in the CI job, I use the image builder packer to create the image every single time. And you know, I need to be able to pull this image from somewhere else, from a well-known location, right? That would be the immediate concern. Just to avoid the overhead of creating the image for every CI job, right? That's the first one. Then the other one is, do we really need to use a kind and start the initial bootstrap cluster? Or we can keep that as a service, just like Bosco's. So we run one instance of that, which will help us, you know, do some amount of CI testing by requesting a cluster from the bootstrap one. Right?
I mean, if you're signing up to maintain this cluster and the CNCF is signing up to pay for it, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, this is for the second half, right? So we still have the issue about the images.
Dims, are you proposing that we pre-build those images per CI version, or something else?
I don't know that yet, because the number of variables, I was trying to enumerate the number of variables this morning, and it turned out to be like 8 of them. You know, the version of kind, the version of KubeADM, the version of the deployed cluster, the version of CapG, you know, all those different things. So I don't know how many images that we need, but then is there a way to like move the images to the projects that we need to start, you know, CapG on it, right?
So ideally, we wouldn't be baking images for every single version that we want to test, just because that's going to be, you know, one, it's time consuming, but the other thing is that's introducing yet another area of variability where we can introduce flakes. I think as long as we have the ability to override the binaries that we're using for test, I think we should kind of stick with a pre-known version that we would have to have some type of process around about updating it for testing purposes.
I just want to clarify, when you say overriding the binaries, do you also mean overriding, like, say, the Docker images for the components that are running as images, or do you mean literally overriding the binaries?
So I think I mean literally overriding the binaries here, and then the images I would expect to be tagged and pushed appropriately within the CI environment already, and we should be able to just pull those.
So basically all of our UDE today sideloads those Docker images. I would just want to clarify that as someone from SIG testing, I'd want us to actually run those images as opposed to say Kubernetes DIM cluster used to do a trick where it would take the binaries that belong in those images and like replace them. That is kind of misleading from a testing perspective. But it also doesn't necessarily require that they're pushed. We kind of just post the release tarball to DCS, and then the nodes pull down the tarballs.
So I think we could definitely, if we absolutely needed to, we can implement a similar model for kind of sideloading the images. I would like to avoid that if at all possible, though, and actually pull from a registry.
So the only concern there is that we haven't had any details on these registries, and pushing to them has actually been one of the like flakier things, shipping around lots of big Docker images.
We could push to the GCR in the project which you have been provided from Boscos and add that to the janitor to delete any images to effectively TTL them. Like a pretty short TTL, but just long enough. I still think sideloading is probably not a bad idea, but if you really want to push, you can do that.
That would make sense, because I don't want us pushing like infinite Docker images to GCR.
Okay, so should we create any action items from that discussion?
Yeah, I think you can assign me and Jason to it. So the title would be like long-lived cluster API, bootstrapper, Jason?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Any other discussion you want to start?
So I just want to throw out that moving the Boscos pool should actually not be that difficult. There's a well-known service account name, like an email address, that is used for pre-submit. So we basically just need to spin up GCP projects that give access to that service account. Obviously, that'd be temporary. Eventually, we'd make a different service account for when we move Prow move. But in the meantime, there's a service account Prow has now. So we make a bunch of projects, make sure they have appropriate quota, and make sure that the CI account has access to them. And then we could add them to the existing Boscos deployment as a pool and start switching jobs to use this new pool. If we do something along those lines, then we won't have to move it. The alternative is we kind of do a wholesale Prow move, and we stand up a new Prow and a new Boscos, and we set up the pools there. The only upside to that, which might be worth considering, is that you don't have state and two locations now about which projects are available. It may be a little bit less disruptive to move that way, but it is more involved than just going ahead and moving the Boscos project.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards the first option at this point. That'll, give us enough. I think it'll help us move things back, turn things off if things don't work well, right?
I also second that. I like the idea of doing it per job where we can like move a pool and then see what breaks. So like move a less sensitive job than like the PR job.
Right, but what I would suggest might be a thing is if we moved CI jobs, if someone were willing to kind of go through the entire of like setting up a second Prow, you could actually move the job over to the other cluster too, as long as it's not a pre-submit, unless you're going to move a whole repo, and then you won't have this issue where when we go to move Prow, the state of which projects are free are CRDs in the cluster we're running builds in. So you're going to have a little bit of a fun time being aware of which GCP projects you're currently running tests in, unless you switch to a whole new set of projects again.
Which we probably could do. If we're, I imagine we want to automate this with Terraform if it is possible to do that, given that we want to like automate everything. So it might not be might not be terrible to, they just have to, the sets can't overlap at any one time, right? So you can always add another set because we're gonna like move a couple so you can grow and like move gradually type thing.
Sure, but also if people are interested in moving the whole thing, periodically run tests or post submits are kind of a low coupling. We could kind of stand up the whole thing for running CI like that end to end.
I like that approach, except for the fact that it's a lot of commitment on a bunch of people, and I don't know who will sign up for doing that work, right?
Sure. I think my only complaint is that the main upside to just standing up some Bosco's projects and having the not CNCF use that is that Google is not directly paying for those anymore. But I don't think it gains any other majorly significant access other than maybe practice creating them. And I'm hoping that creating these projects is not particularly.
Right, then the next question I would ask is, who all can we tap to, on the shoulder to say, will you be able to help us out? Because, the knowledge of, the number of people who have that knowledge is a handful, right, at this point?
I don't think anybody has any special knowledge there. I mean, they're literally just GCP projects that happen to be put in the Bosco's pool, and there's a Prow service account that needs access. And if that's not documented, it's like you can trivially obtain the name of the service account from any pre-submit.
No, I'm asking about the second option where we are parallelly building up everything in CNCF infrastructure.
Oh, I mean, so similarly, possibly Wagner or something, but like the spinning up one is pretty well documented, and moving the jobs is kind of just picking some job and shuffling the YAML from one repo to the other.
So you don't see too much. Well, the reason I like that second approach is because it's parallel and we don't disrupt anything. So it's like pros and cons both ways, right?
The is on
Ben, I think there are some problems with internet. At least I couldn't hear anything you said. Maybe let's wait a little bit.
So maybe I can ask Jason this question. So Jason, do we know who in our employer has tried this out, so we can go ask for somebody who might have done this before, a pro, and starting up the testing infrastructure?
I think Andrew Kutz might have been somewhat involved in it, but
okay.
I am not entirely sure.
Okay. Then in the community, who might be interested, like Steve Kuznetsov? I'm thinking about people outside of Google as well.
I know Steve has plenty of experience with Prow,
right.
the Red Hat environment.
Okay. Okay, I think we can stop the discussion.
Yes, so should we add the action items? Dims, should I add you there too? Dims, I can't hear you.
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay, so let's close this topic too. Anything another topic we want to start?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, asking first time, second, and third. So do we want to close the meeting because I can't see any additional topics?
Sounds good. Thanks for running this meeting today.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you guys for doing notes. Thank you, Justin and Hippie Hacker.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye everyone, have a good day.
Thanks, Bart.
Thanks, have a good one.